We'll stay in New York for the last thing I want to talk about today. And we've discussed it on the show a couple of different times. Michael Hawley and I last Friday spent a lot of time talking about it. I've written some things about it. And I've just done more thinking about this. The way the NFL is handling Steve Tisch, the co-owner of the Giants, who was implicated in the latest batch of Epstein files. His communications with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein had been convicted once, after he had been given the highest level possible of sex offender status, after everyone who was in a position to know or should know who and what Jeffrey Epstein was. That's when Steve Tisch was communicating, called it a brief association. The information that's been released and reported by the likes of The Athletic and the Wall Street Journal paint a picture of anything but brief. But they had this arrangement apparently where Jeffrey Epstein was trying to connect Steve Tisch with dates. And the NFL has taken a very basic, perfunctory, we have to gather the facts. We have to investigate whether we'll investigate. We'll look into it. I mean, technically that's an investigation, but it's kind of like a pre-investigation. Like, we're not investigating him yet. We're just investigating whether or not we need to investigate him. And the commissioner addressed it at the Super Bowl press conference, the Monday of Super Bowl week. I asked the league again today if there's anything to add beyond what the commissioner said, and the league said there isn't. But I want to build on what we discussed on Friday, because the story from last week from The Athletic, it added that element beyond the emails. It added the element of the woman who was interviewed by Radio France 1. And she told the story of being connected by Epstein to an American producer. And it wasn't clearly Steve Tisch, but there's enough there. There's enough of a connection potentially to justify, if not mandate, an investigation by the NFL as to whether or not this was Steve Tisch. I mean, that's the threshold question. Was this woman who was interviewed fairly recently by Radio France 1, was she referring to Steve Tisch? Because the picture it paints, as I said last week, it kind of has a Harvey Weinstein vibe to it. Film producer, somebody who wants a break, somebody who's looking for help, and, well, I'll help you in exchange. I mean, let's call it for what it is. I'll help you in exchange for sexual favors. And that in and of itself is enough reason. If the NFL is serious about the contents of the personal conduct policy, if the NFL is telling the truth when it says owners are held to a higher standard than players, that's enough to justify an aggressive investigation, the same kind of thing that a player may face in a situation like that. Not an effort to just keep quiet and let it all blow over. And that's what I feel like so many people are doing who have been connected to Epstein. The Casey Wasserman thing is just bizarre. The guy is selling his entire talent agency, but he's still going to be the chair of the LA 28 Olympic Organizing Committee. And it's all about PR and managing the PR and dealing with the things that happen. And for the NFL, there's really nothing that is forcing them to do anything, because there's no further development that is going to naturally happen unless it's driven by the media. And look, it was the media that drove the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing in the first place. Julie Brown, the Miami Herald, who had the initial reporting that started all of this. And here's how I got back to thinking more about Tisch and researching this a little bit more. She retweeted our story that kind of takes what was in The Athletic with the information that was provided in the interview that the woman gave to Radio France 1, tied it back to the Epstein communications with Steve Tisch. And maybe there's something there. Maybe this isn't something we just shrug off as the activities between consenting adults. Maybe there is an element of this trade-off, this Weinstein-style trade-off. And one of the people who responded to her retweet of our story pointed out Title VII of the Human Rights Act of 1964. And that unlocked my prior life as a lawyer, because I handled a lot of cases that fell under Title VII and or the West Virginia equivalent, the West Virginia Human Rights Act, but most states have their own version of Title VII. But the basic prohibition against sexual harassment, there's two forms: hostile work environment based on gender, and quid pro quo sexual harassment, where basically there's a bargain that's done. You give me what I want, I'll give you what you want. And you don't have to be an employee for that to kick in. And although it's civil liability almost exclusively, when you do it, it's still something that runs afoul of the laws that are on the books, from the federal government to the state of New York to New York City, because this incident allegedly happened. If Tisch was the one that the woman is referring to, it happened in New York City. And when you go back and look at the specifics, the details that she shared in the Radio France 1 interview, there was contact involved. The unidentified film producer put his hand on her thigh. Well, if she didn't want that, that's a violation. Technically, civil law, technically criminal law. It's an unwanted touching. It's a battery. So my point is, I'm not saying the guy needs to have a perp walk and he's going to be prosecuted. I don't see enough in what's out there now to think there's going to be any type of a prosecution. There could be more that would come out through further investigation. This could just be the tip of the iceberg. We don't know. My point is this: there's more than enough there for the NFL to be troubled. There's more than enough there for the NFL to do something. And it's not enough to just, in my opinion, have a press conference, word salad, word salad, word salad, and then just move on and await further evidence that you, the NFL, are in control of harvesting. Because if they're not motivated to get the evidence, they're not going to get the evidence. The only way they're going to get to the bottom of this is to investigate. Try to figure out who the person is that gave that interview, that may or may not trace back to an interaction with Steve Tisch. Talk to that person if she'll talk. It's one of the flaws in the NFL's personal conduct policy and its in-house justice system. It has no subpoena power. It can't make anyone cooperate if they don't want to, but they can try. And above all else, they can bring in Tisch. They can bring in Tisch and they can question him on the basic proposition of, is this you that's being referred to here? If the woman won't cooperate, show him the contents of the story in The Athletic, show him the potential objective facts that connect it back to him, and find out, is it you? Are they going to do that? Have they done that? Are they going to tell us what they've done? I just think some things are so important that you can't just brush it under the rug. And you can't just do your investigation and not tell anyone what you did. When you're a multi-billion-dollar business that thrives on taxpayer money for the construction and renovation of stadiums, that thrives on people showing up in the tens of thousands to pay for tickets to attend games where they buy overpriced food and beer and merch, and in the millions to tune in and watch on the public airwaves. I don't know how you can just justify doing nothing and saying nothing and just hoping that everyone moves on. And there's been so much of that with this whole Epstein thing. At every level of government and private industry, to the extent that captains of industry have been dragged into this. Let's just run out the clock. Let's just let the air come out of this balloon and we'll move on to something else. And if we've learned anything over the past several months, people are not going to let this go. And as it relates to the NFL's specific corner of this ugly universe of the Epstein files, somebody's got to keep banging the drum. And for now, I'm going to keep banging the drum. And we'll see what comes next. Will there be some reporting? And I know you're thinking, well, you can do some of the reporting. Well, I can, but I got to factor in my time, my overall obligations, my capacity to get to the bottom. I'm going to go to New York and start sniffing around and asking people. Like, I don't have time to do the kinds of things that other media outlets are in a position to do. And I'm supporting and rooting for them to go do it. Find this stuff out, and we'll showcase it. We'll trumpet it. But somebody needs to do something. If the NFL is not going to do it, somebody needs to do something because it just feels like there's more there. And it feels like the NFL and Tisch, and I don't know where the Giants come down on all this. I don't know how John Mara, Chris Mara, I don't know how they feel about it, but it just feels like someone should expect something more. That there's enough there that the league should be troubled. The Giants should be troubled. I get emails from Giants fans who are troubled, and they want to know more about this. They don't want it to just fall into the void and be forgotten. And it feels like, and the only reason I'm talking about it today, it feels like the NFL has constructed a scenario where this is just going to be forgotten. Because absent fresh reporting, like what we saw last week from The Athletic, absent that, the NFL is not going to be forced to do anything. Absent that, the NFL controls the whole process. They're the ones who are looking for the facts. And if they don't tell us what they're doing, we can only assume they're not looking very hard. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.